Alex here with a legal nuts and bolts video on standing. Standing is an extremely basic legal principle that just covers the idea that only specific types of people can bring cases to court. Let me give you an extremely simple example. Say you've got a friend and two of that guy's friends are fighting. They're fist fighting. Those two people injure themselves and they end up in the hospital. If one of those two people wants to sue each other, they can, because they've both been aggrieved. They've both injured each other in the fight. But the friend who was watching the fight can't go to court and file a lawsuit. That person was just a guy who was watching, and they weren't struck, they didn't go to the hospital, they didn't suffer any injury. That person does not have standing to file the lawsuit. That's one of the ways that lawsuits get dismissed, is sometimes somebody will file a lawsuit who doesn't have standing to file that particular suit. Now, this was an obvious, super simple example that anyone could understand. But there are also situations where standing can become complicated, because in certain types of cases, standing isn't exactly very clear. And in those types of cases, typically statutes will create standing. I'm going to just give one example, because if people have specific questions, I want them to just post it in the comments and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. But this more complicated example that I'm going to use is the termination of parental rights. If somebody wants to terminate a person's parental rights, it's not clear who's going to have standing to do that. And that's because the child who's suffering, well, we're going to assume that the child is suffering severe abuse or neglect or has been abandoned, is a minor. That child isn't competent to use the court system, at least not in the eyes of the law. So the child doesn't really have any ability to go to court. And then it gets really murky when you think about, like, who should try this? Should it be the grandparents? Should it be the government? It's just one of those things that isn't clear. So in the termination of parental rights statutes, there are specific statutes that say who can actually file the petition. That specific statute creates standing. It has a list of people that can file it. So I kind of covered a very basic example where people get into a fist fight, and one of those people can file the suit because they've been injured, they've been struck, they ended up going to the hospital. An obvious example of standing. I covered a more complicated example of standing where the right is created by virtue of a statute that specifically says who can file the suit. And I think at this point, I'm going to end this video, and if anyone has any questions, as I mentioned earlier, just post it in the comments below. That's basically what standing is, and hopefully that ends all the confusion around it, because I have seen it pop up in the comments a few times before. With that, I'll see you guys next time.